Right now, the Ukrainian Air Force has delivered a deadly strike. The occupiers were reduced to ashes. Exclusive footage. Russia sends soldiers to assault and in Zhiguli cars. And Russian conscripts refuse to rescue the wounded. Crimea and Belgorod are on fire. Drone strikes, destroyed boats, and air defense systems. Germany is pouring billions into weapons for the Ukrainian armed forces. A sensational decision by Berlin. And Trump has declared an economic war on everyone except Putin. What does this mean for Ukraine? All this and more in our segment Hotspot. The Ukrainian armed forces are destroying the enemy from the air. The MiG-29 strikes the Russians with hammer bombs in the Pokrovsky direction. Russia's losses are shocking. Meanwhile, the enemy's conscripts are abandoning their wounded to die right on the battlefield. Disturbing news, Russia is preparing a large-scale offensive as early as April. What is the Kremlin planning? The details will surprise you. Watch!
Ukrainian aviation is lighting up in the literal sense of the word. In this video, exclusive footage from the front line, a MiG-29 strikes with 2 ASM hammer bombs on a house with Russian occupiers in the Zaporizhzhia region on the Pokrovsky direction. Nevertheless, the enemy does not cease attempts to find weak spots on the front and advance. There is an increase in the activity of Russian troops on the front. They are intensifying strikes on key directions, preparing for a potential large-scale offensive. New tactics create new challenges for the Russians. As discovered by the Atesh movement partisans in the Zaporizhzhia region, the Russians are increasingly using small group tactics without the use of equipment. Accordingly, in the event of injury, no one will come to evacuate the occupiers. Their further fate, either to remain dying under the open sky or to be captured by our soldiers.
But again, they are already beginning to feel an acute shortage of personnel. Therefore, they resort to the tactic of small groups is being used. There is infiltration, groups, are moving in 2s, 3s, 5s, up to 10 people in squads. Heavy equipment. The strike zone, up to a depth of 5 kilometers, is practically not approached. And if it does approach, it's the kind that is clearly not regretted.
Most often, the Russians first send small groups of infantry forward. Then the occupiers look for cover to gather strength. Ukrainian aerial reconnaissance detects such attempts, and the operators of the Spartan UAV group eliminate the Russians using different types of drones. Even though the Russians are dying like flies, they do not stop coming to Ukraine. Ukrainian military report that for April-May of this year, Russian forces are preparing a new offensive on the Kharkiv and Sumy regions.
We definitely have information that the Russian Federation is indeed preparing an offensive for April. There are units currently located in the rear areas in our direction. This is approximately 2 to 3 divisions. They have reserves, they are well staffed with personnel, and have been on training grounds for over a month preparing for their future actions.
There are attempts to break through on quad bikes or motorcycles, but our FPV operators handle them quite confidently and quickly. For now, it is more of a tactic of intimidating and terrorizing the civilian population. Yesterday's shelling of Kharkiv, the shelling of Zaporizhzhia, the shelling of peaceful cities, a typical deceitful situation for the Russian army and for Russia as a whole.
Another typical tactic of the Kremlin dictator is to mobilize as many people as possible to then send them to the front, which is what he has been doing in recent days.
Grab a person off the street and throw them into a training camp. In a month, they will more or less learn to dig in, shoot, move in a dispersed formation, camouflage, and distinguish a grenade from an anti-tank mine. In principle, this is quite enough for a short offensive.
The key point in all this is that the offensives by the occupying army are indeed short. However, the casualties from all this are too high.
At this moment, Trump has declared war. The president of the USA shocked the planet, imposed a record tariff, nullified trade, and called it America's Liberation Day. Europe is in panic, China is furious and threatens retaliation. But shock! Russia avoided the blow. Why did Trump spare Putin? And most importantly, how might the new trade war affect aid to Ukraine? Details in the report.
Trump declared a new war. The president of the USA announced the imposition of tariffs against almost all countries, calling this day historic for America.
Dear Americans, the day of liberation we have long awaited has arrived. April 2nd, 2025 will forever go down in history as the day of the rebirth of American industry. The day when America took its destiny back into its own hands. And the day when we began to make America wealthy again.
At the same time, he declared a state of emergency in the USA. The reason is the threat of a trade balance deficit in the United States. An interesting decision.
What Trump has done now is, well, absolutely not the norm. In the modern world, I think this is absolutely obvious to everyone, precisely because this is not the norm. In the modern world, Trump is now declaring a state of emergency in the economy. Why? Because yes, indeed, there is a big hole in the United States economy.
The new tariffs even affected animals. That is, islands where the population is 0 and only penguins live. But these tariffs did not affect Russia and Belarus. As reported by the White House, the sanctions already exclude the possibility of trade between the countries.
But when Trump does not even impose a minimal 10% tariff, it indicates that Trump is currently interested in continuing the dialogue.
And now, more details. For Ukraine, a basic tariff of 10% applies. Vietnam has the highest rate at 46%. China is in second place with 34%. But they have already stated that they are ready to retaliate against Trump.
China is firmly opposed to this and will take countermeasures to protect its rights and interests.
And the European Union, which Trump adores, received a 20% tariff. But they have already responded to everything that is happening.
President Trump's announcement of tariffs for the entire world, including the European Union, is a serious blow to the global economy. I deeply regret his choice. The consequences will be terrible for millions of people around the world, as well as for the most vulnerable countries, which are now subject to some of the highest U.S. tariffs.
Meanwhile, Putin's special representative, Kirill Dmitriev, met with Witkoff. And do you know where? In Washington. For this, the visa sanctions were temporarily lifted from Putin's puppet.
Dmitriev, Witkoff, Trump, basically, they all understand finance, they all understand business. And I am deeply convinced that Dmitriev went to Washington with a whole package of motivating investment projects for the President of the United States and for the United States as a whole. There might be a political undertone beneath them.
Well, the one who is definitely not having fun is surely Elon Musk. It is reported that Trump has informed his circle that in the coming weeks, Elon Musk will cease to perform the duties assigned to him in the White House.
In fact, the work he was doing in Trump's team, and for Trump, as we understand, he was doing it successfully from Trump's point of view. It started to significantly impact his business. Most likely the investors, the boards of directors, which of course are undoubtedly of significant importance in such a large corporate business, they probably insisted that Musk should end this activity.
Thus, the decision was made that it would be better for Musk to return to business. He certainly excels at that.
Urgent. The Russian army is exhausted. There is a critical shortage of people among the occupiers. Meanwhile, the second army in the world is storming Donbass not with armored vehicles, but with Zhigulis and Nivas. However, in some places this yields results because the occupiers are fitting the cars with anti-drone nets. Currently, the Russians are unsuccessfully trying to assault in the Pokrovsky direction. What is happening on the front line at this moment? Watch further.
Ukrainian defense forces have advanced in the Pokrovsky direction. This is stated in the report of the Institute for the Study of War. Published geolocated footage shows that the Ukrainian armed forces have advanced southeast of Kotlin and southwest of Pokrovsky.
Near Pokrovsky, the fighting has been going on for almost half a year, if not more, by the way. And the Russians have not achieved any advancements or successes there. On the contrary, we have made at least 4 counterattacks, reclaiming some positions that were previously lost. These include Belia Kotlin, Belusivka.
In the Lyman direction, Russian forces attacked near the settlements of Rekivka, Novomikhailivka, and towards Zelena Dolina. In the Toretsk area, the defense forces repelled enemy assaults in the regions of Druzhba, Deliivka, Toretsk, and Leonidivka. In the Pokrovsky direction, there were battles near Tarasivka, Yelizavetivka, Uspenivka, and Alexandropol.
We see that from the third, somewhere between 30% to 50% of all combat encounters occur right in Pokrovsky, near Pokrovsk. Well, to be honest, it's hard to understand the logic of the Russians. They are unable to capture this settlement, though Yet they continue to actively sacrifice hundreds and thousands of people without any progress.
The Russian occupiers made a futile attempt to storm the area near the settlement of Andriivka in the Donetsk region. The enemy deployed about 2 platoons of personnel and armored vehicles. Confirmed losses of the invaders' armored vehicles. 12 units were hit, of which 7 were completely destroyed. In terms of personnel, the Russians lost 18 people and another 7 were wounded. The warriors of the 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Armed Forces of Ukraine shot down a rare Russian drone, Albatros M5, for the first time. The military noted that this reconnaissance drone is equipped with a neural network that records sounds and analyzes images in real time. However, as noted by the 63rd Brigade, their anti-aircraft gunners were still able to destroy this drone and published footage of its downing.
The destruction of electronic warfare systems allows us to attack Russian positions precisely and accurately. Here, it's quite an obvious question, but unfortunately the Russians still have plenty of electronic warfare systems, making it quite difficult for us to use our drones. Therefore, I understand that we will now focus on either destroying the electronic warfare systems or enhancing the production of our fiber optic drones. A fiber optic drone is maneuverable, obviously, and not as fast, but it is completely protected from electronic warfare systems.
The operators of the Phoenix UAV from the Pomsta Brigade demonstrated their work in the area of the Serebryansky forestry. During the battles, Ukrainian soldiers managed to destroy a Grad multiple rocket launcher system, mortars, infantry fighting vehicles, 24 military trucks, a fuel and lubricants depot, and an ammunition depot.
The Russian army assaults Uspanovka daily. This is how the enemy wants to break through in the Pokrovsk direction. Using passenger cars, the occupier is trying to transfer infantry to the village.
Every day, just in this direction, the Ukrainian armed forces send at least 24 Russian assault troops to a concert with Kobzon. The use of civilian vehicles in assault operations indicates significant losses of Russian equipment. The pace of the occupiers' army advancement has fallen to its lowest since the spring of last year. In March, the Russian army captured 130 square kilometers of Ukrainian territories. For example, in January, this figure was almost 3 times higher. The reason is not related to any possible negotiations. The Russian troops, are tired and exhausted. If you look at the frontline map, it's easy to notice that recently the Russian army has hardly advanced. The offensive in the Kursk region is the last significant change. It may seem that there is a lull in the war, and in general, Putin's army is preparing for peace talks. But analysts' data suggests otherwise. The number of Russian attacks increased significantly by the end of March and has already reached March levels. In other words, they try many things, but achieve little. The operation in the Kursk region, which began back in August 2024, has significantly slowed the advance in Donbass. In the fall of 2024, the Russian armed forces were still actively advancing. But by winter, the cumulative effect began to show. Troop fatigue, heavy losses and the redeployment of the most combat-ready units to the Kursk region. And now the advance has run out of steam.
The Russians would like to eventually, let's say, in quotes, complete their operation in the Kursk region. And these troops, these reserves are tied up there, unable to be redeployed to another direction. They are short on people everywhere, but the fact remains that our group in the Kursk region and in the border areas is holding back the enemy, and they, for the most part, cannot move anywhere.
In the last 3 months of 2024, the Russian army occupied 1,620 square kilometers, but in the first 3 months of 2025, only 640 square kilometers. Putin is using no less human resources in countless assaults, yet the results are rapidly declining. Additionally, the Ukrainian armed forces are already conducting military operations in the neighboring Belgorod region to Kursk. Fighting in the border villages has been going on for almost 2 weeks. The Russians have not yet been able to drive the Ukrainian armed forces out of the second region.
The course not only prevents them from advancing in this operational zone, but also prevents them from redeploying troops directly to eastern Ukraine. I mean, the Yamburov direction primarily, where the fighting continues very intensively. The number of eliminated occupiers has already surpassed 915,000 since the full-scale invasion. 915,000. Just think about that number. Even if you spread it across all regions of Russia. As of today, it's already significant, and this can no longer be hidden.
The high combat capability of the armed forces of Ukraine, the significant losses of Russian army personnel, the shortage of equipment at the front, and reaching stable positions are factors that have led to the current stabilization at the front and have effectively nullified the advance of Putin's horde. And possibly in the near future, the front line will start moving in the opposite direction.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
A powerful strike on Crimea. The armed forces of Ukraine shocked the Kremlin. Russian landing craft and an anti-aircraft complex have been blown up. Meanwhile, the armed forces of Ukraine broke through the defense and advanced 3 to 4 kilometers into the Belgorod region. At night, the sky over Kursk and Belgorod was ablaze. A swarm of drones attacked military targets. Russia acknowledges 93 allegedly downed UAVs. And this is just the beginning. What is happening on the front now? Details in our report.
Masterful work in destroying enemy equipment. Ukrainian scouts in Crimea destroyed 2 Russian landing craft and a Tor M2 anti-aircraft missile system with drones. High-speed transport and landing craft of Project 02510 BK-16 were hit. These craft are intended for special forces units during operations in the coastal maritime zones. In addition, a patrol boat of Project 03160 Raptor was also hit. This is a series of Russian high-speed coastal patrol boats. It should also be noted that in addition to the boats, strikes were carried out on the Tor M2 anti-aircraft missile system of the Russian occupation forces. This means we can say that the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine continues successful operations in eliminating both the naval assets of the Black Sea Fleet of the Russian Federation and primarily the missile and air defense systems of the Russian occupiers in Crimea. The Belgorod region also shuddered. There, Ukrainian aviation successfully struck military targets. According to analysis, the attacks were carried out near Demidovka and Kondratovka. It is about striking legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. The strikes were carried out on the command and control points of the Russian occupation forces, minimizing the possibility of so-called horizontal connections and the organization of active defense.
Additionally, as a result of a drone attack, an ammunition depot of the occupiers placed by Russian military in an uninhabited apartment building exploded. Meanwhile, terrorist Russia continues to strike civilian targets in Ukraine. The enemy once again attacked cities with kamikaze drones. A series of explosions occurred in Odessa, Zaporizhia, and Kharkiv. But in Russia, the night was also restless. The Ministry of Defense of the killer country reported 97 drones shot down overnight over the Kursk, Rostov, and Belgorod regions. Additionally, Ukrainian forces in the Belgorod region managed to advance 3 to 4 kilometers into enemy territory, breaking through the first line of defense of the Russian army. There is no officially confirmed information from either the Russian or Ukrainian side yet.
In the Belgorod region, the so-called Surovikin lines have been breached, on which more than $200 million from the federal and local budgets were spent. In addition, the successful actions of the Ukrainian defense forces in the Belgorod region have significantly reduced the activity of Russian troops in the Kursk region. This concerns the redeployment of operational reserves from the territory of the Kursk region, an area of active combat, directly to Belgorod. In addition, it should be noted that the Ukrainian defense forces have effectively blocked the possibility of transferring operational reserves of Russian troops from the operational tactical group Belgorod, which numbers up to 60,000 personnel.
And the cherry on top, Russia has begun its spring draft, the largest in the last 14 years. The Kremlin dictator wants to send more than 160,000 people to fight in Ukraine. They will be drafting Russians aged 18 to 30 from April 1st, and this is no joke, until July 15th. Supposedly these people are not going to be sent to war, but you all understand. However, Russia has fewer and fewer reserves and fewer people willing to fight. Therefore, in a few months, the Russian dictator might start a global mobilization again.
The Russian Federation is facing a shortage of personnel, both on the direct line of combat contact and during mobilization activities. There is objective control data indicating the coercive nature of mobilization activities, including in Moscow. This refers to the actual Russification of citizens of the Russian Federation, where individuals of conscription age are forcibly detained and sent to military enlistment offices for further service in the armed forces of the occupying country.
Putin does not want peace, as most experts say, which is why he needs as much new cannon fodder as possible.
Meanwhile, Germany is pouring 11 billion euros into weapons for Ukraine. The country's foreign minister made a loud statement. Berlin is providing colossal military aid to Kyiv. Why is Germany sharply increasing its support? What does this mean for the front, and how much weaponry will the Ukrainian armed forces receive? Watch in the report.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock arrived in Kyiv. In the complex situation regarding negotiations and military aid between the US and Ukraine, Baerbock came to show that Germany fully supports Ukraine.
Germany will continue to support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We will help achieve a just peace and your membership in the EU.
The German ambassador did not arrive empty-handed. She confirmed that Ukraine will receive an additional 11 billion euros in military aid. 3 of these will be provided this year, and the remaining 8,250 million will be given from 2026 to 2029.
Due to the deadlock in relations between the US and Russia, it is absolutely necessary for us to show that we stand with Ukraine and support it now more than ever before.
This year, Germany has already sent Ukraine the first package of military aid. These include MRAP armored vehicles, ammunition for Leopard 1 tanks, ammunition for Marder IFVs, missiles for Iris-T, Zuzana wheeled howitzers, Bison 1 armored engineering vehicles, the mine plows, and hundreds of thousands of military equipment items ranging from bullets to sleeping bags and the tourniquets. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Germany ranks second after the USA in terms of the volume of military aid provided to Ukraine.
The economies of the USA and Germany provide the greatest support to Ukraine. In absolute terms, the USA is ahead. However, relative to economic power, Germany's support is 4 times greater than that of the USA. This is an effective distribution of the burden among allies. We in Germany are also able to continue supporting Ukraine at the current high level.
By the end of 2025, the German government will supply 17 Iris-T medium and short-range systems to protect Ukraine's airspace from Russian missile terror. Baerbock is confident. Only systematic and continuous military aid to Ukraine, along with sanctions, will force Russia to change its plans. Therefore, Germany will only increase its military aid to Ukraine.
We know that true peace does not come through surrender. Those who pressure Ukraine to concede are negotiating not for peace, but for another escalation. A ceasefire on Putin's terms would not be the end of the war, but a prelude to the next offensive. Our response to Putin's war is peace through strength, peace through European unity and determination.
In the first half of 2025, Germany will deliver Leopard tanks, the Marder infantry fighting vehicles, and Sea King helicopters to Ukraine. Military aid from Germany will not cease even in the event of negotiations and after them.
At the conclusion of any negotiations, Ukraine must have at its disposal armed forces capable of repelling any renewed Russian attack. In financial, material, and logistical terms, this will be a huge challenge. Ukraine will not be able to accomplish this task alone in the foreseeable future.
Additionally, the German foreign minister announced the allocation of an additional 130 billion euros to Ukraine for humanitarian needs and measures to strengthen stability. Since the start of the full-scale war, Germany has provided Ukraine with more than 43 billion euros, of which 15 billion were for military needs.
That's all. Well, for more fiery news from the front, tune in to the next episode.